There is a specific kind of silence that you can only find at 6 a.m. before the world wakes up, before the chaos begins. And for 15 years, that silence was my best friend. I sat on my back porch, wrapping my hands around a warm ceramic mug, inhaling the steam rising from my black coffee, mixed with the sweet scent of the jasmine vines I had planted with my own hands a decade ago. Every wooden slat on this deck, I sanded and stained myself. Every flower in that garden, I watered with my own sweat. This wasn't just a house. It was my sanctuary. It was the place I healed after my wife passed away. The place where I learned to breathe again. I took a sip, closed my eyes, and listened to the cardinals singing in the old oak tree. It was perfect. Absolutely perfect. But then, the low rumble started. It wasn't a gentle sound. It was a growl. A massive moving truck backed into the driveway next door, and the air brakes hissing like a venomous snake. I watched, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. The sold sign had been up for weeks, but I hadn't met the buyers. And then I saw him. A man in a sharp, overly expensive suit stepped out of a luxury SUV that cost more than my entire retirement fund. He didn't look at the neighborhood. He didn't look at the trees. He looked at his phone. He was screaming at someone on the other end. "I don't care what it costs. Just get it done," he yelled, his voice shattering my peace like a hammer hitting glass. This was Mr. Miller. He walked past the moving crew without acknowledging them, kicking a stray pebble into my yard as he passed. He didn't know I was there, watching from the shadows of my porch. But in that moment, seeing the way he slammed his car door, seeing the sneer on his face, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. My sanctuary, my quiet little corner of the world, was about to be invaded, and I had no idea just how bad it was going to get. 2 weeks later, I came home from a double shift at the warehouse, my back aching, my feet throbbing, just wanting to collapse into my armchair. But as I pulled into my driveway, I didn't hear the wind in the trees. I heard screaming metal and the roar of an excavator. My heart hammered against my ribs. I ran to the backyard, dropping my keys in the grass. "No! No! What are you doing?" I shouted. But my voice was drowned out by the machinery. 3 men were there, tearing up the earth exactly on the property line. But it wasn't just dirt, they were moving. My grandmother's lilac bush, the one I had propagated from a cutting she gave me before she died, was lying on its side, its roots exposed and ripped. Dying in the afternoon sun, I felt tears prick my eyes. Hot and angry, I ran up to the foreman. "Stop! You're killing my plants!" I yelled, waving my arms. The foreman just pointed a thumb over his shoulder. I looked up, and there was Miller, looking down at me like I was a bug he wanted to squash. He wasn't apologetic, he looked bored. "Mr. Miller," I called out, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and grief. "Your crew. They destroyed my lilacs. That bush was 50 years old." He took a slow sip of his wine, adjusted his sunglasses, and finally deigned to speak to me. "It was in the way of my view," he said simply, as if discussing the weather. "I'm putting up a fence, a modern privacy fence. You should be thanking me. It'll hide that. Whatever that is you call a garden." I stood there, stunned, looking at the mangled roots of the plant my grandmother loved. He didn't just cross a physical line. He crossed a moral one. He thought his money gave him the right to erase my history. And as the excavator roared back to life, burying the remains of my flowers, I realized this wasn't just construction. This was war. The next morning, I tried to be the better man. I really did. My father always taught me that you catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. So, I put on my best shirt, swallowed my pride, and walked over to the Miller residence. I didn't want a feud, I just wanted respect. I knocked on the massive mahogany door. Knock, knock, knock. It took 5 minutes for him to answer. When he finally opened it, he didn't even say hello. He just leaned against the door frame, blocked the entrance, and looked at his watch. Make it quick. I have a tea time in 20 minutes, he said, his voice dripping with condescension. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my hands. Mr. Miller, I began, keeping my tone calm, about the fence and the damage to my garden. We need to discuss the property line. According to the city survey, your contractors are digging 2 feet into my land, and I expect compensation for the lilacs. He laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was a cold, sharp bark. Compensation? He repeated, mocking me. He stepped out onto the porch, towering over me. Look, buddy, let me explain how the world works. I'm improving this neighborhood. That eyesore of a cottage you live in, it drags down my property value just by existing. He poked a finger toward my chest, not touching me, but close enough that I could smell the expensive cologne masking his rotten attitude. I'm building my fence where I want, and it's going to be tall enough so I don't have to see your pathetic little yard. If you don't like it, sell. Move to a trailer park where you belong. He stepped back inside and started to close the door. My property, my rules. Don't step on my grass on your way out. Slam. The door shut in my face. I stood there, staring at the wood grain, feeling the heat rise up my neck. My hands curled into fists. He thought I was weak. He thought I was just some old man he could bully. He thought money was the only power that mattered. But as I turned around and walked back to my eyesore of a house, the sadness in my heart evaporated. It was replaced by something colder, something harder. If he wanted to talk about rules, well, I was about to give him a lesson in law that he would never forget. That night, the silence of my house felt different. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy. I sat at my old oak dining table, the only light coming from the glowing screen of my laptop. It was 3 a.m. My eyes were burning. My coffee had gone cold hours ago. But I couldn't stop. I wasn't looking at social media. I wasn't watching TV. I was deep in the labyrinth of the county website, reading the municipal zoning laws. Section 8, paragraph C. Miller had said, "My property, my rules." He was wrong. It wasn't his rules. It was the city's rules. And arrogance makes people blind to details. I read every single line, every footnote, every addendum. I felt like a detective looking for a murder weapon. And then, just as the sun began to paint the sky purple, I found it! My heart actually skipped a beat. There it was, staring at me in black and white. Loophole 14B. Structures designated as ornamental trellises or windbreaks are exempt from the 6-foot fence height limit, provided they are set back exactly 4 inches from the property line. A smile slowly spread across my face. The first genuine smile I had in weeks. It was a wicked smile. Miller wanted a view. He wanted privacy. I was going to give him more privacy than he could ever handle. I leaned back in my chair, cracking my knuckles. The anger that had been boiling inside me cooled down into something solid, sharp, and dangerous. I wasn't just an old man with a garden anymore. I was a man with a plan. And the law, the beautiful, complicated, bureaucratic law, was entirely on my side. The next day, my dining table transformed into a war room. I rolled out large sheets of drafting paper, sharpened my pencils, and began to draw. This wasn't just construction. This was art. I called it Project Nemesis. I sketched a structure that was 12 feet high, twice the height of a normal fence. On my side, the side facing my porch, it would be beautiful cedar wood, stained a deep, rich mahogany, lined with climbing hydrangeas. It would be a vertical garden. But the other side, the side facing Miller's $1 million glass living room, oh, that was the masterpiece. I designed it to be made of corrugated sheet metal, but not just any metal. I ordered high-gloss industrial aluminum. It was cheap, it was durable, and it acted like a giant, slightly warped mirror. I did the math on the sun's trajectory. Every afternoon, from 2 p.m. to sunset, the sun would hit that aluminum wall and bounce a concentrated beam of heat and blinding light directly, and I mean directly, into his master bedroom and patio. I calculated the costs. It would take a chunk of my savings, but the look on his face, that would be priceless. I picked up the phone and called the lumber yard. Yes, I need a delivery, I said, my voice steady and commanding, and I need it fast. As I hung up, I looked out the window at Miller's house. He was out there yelling at his pool boy. "Enjoy the shade while you can, Miller," I whispered to the glass, because things are about to get very, very bright. Saturday morning arrived with the rumble of a delivery truck. But this time, it was for ME. A massive pile of lumber, bags of concrete, and those shiny, hideous aluminum sheets were dropped onto my driveway. I put on my old work gloves, the leather worn smooth by years of labor. I walked to the property line, tape measure in hand. I measured 4 inches inward from the border. Precision was key. If I was off by even an inch, he could sue me. I marked the spots for the posts with bright orange spray paint. PSSSHHT, PSSSHHT. The sound drew attention. Miller came out onto his deck wearing a silk robe, holding his espresso. He looked down at me with that familiar sneer. "What is this?" he called out, laughing. "Building a dog house for a stray? Or maybe a lemonade stand to pay your bills?" I didn't look up. I grabbed the post hole digger and slammed it into the earth. "Bud, just doing some landscaping." "Neighbor," I said, keeping my voice cheerful, "enhancing the property value." "Just like you said." He scoffed. "Well, keep it quiet. I have guests coming over tonight. I don't want to hear that racket." I paused, wiped sweat from my forehead, and looked him dead in the eye. "Don't worry," I said. Dig, scoop, pour. The concrete mixed with the water, turning into the gray sludge that would anchor his nightmare forever. He had no idea what was rising from the ground. He thought he was watching an old man piddle around in the dirt. He didn't know he was watching the construction of his own prison. By Tuesday afternoon, the structure was complete. From my side, it looked like a charming, rustic wall, ready for my hydrangeas to climb. But I wasn't waiting for the flowers. I was waiting for the sun. It was 2:15 p.m. The clouds parted, and the sun hit the western angle of the sky. I walked around the block to get a look from the street, just to be sure. What I saw took my breath away, in the most satisfying way possible. The 12-foot wall of high-gloss aluminum was acting exactly like a magnifying glass. A massive, concentrated beam of blinding white light was blasting directly into Miller's floor-to-ceiling windows. It was so bright, you couldn't even look at his house without squinting. I went back to my porch, sat down, and waited. It didn't take long. I heard a door slide open violently. "What the hell?" Miller screamed. I peeked through a small gap in the wood. He was standing on his patio, covering his eyes with his arm. The reflection was heating up his expensive limestone tiles so much that I could see heat waves shimmering in the air. His modern view was gone, replaced by a 12-foot, shining, burning wall of metal. He tried to sit on his patio furniture, but jumped up immediately. Ouch! The metal armrest must have been scorching hot. He retreated inside, but even through the glass, the glare was relentless. His living room, usually dark and cool, looked like the inside of a toaster oven. The air conditioner on the side of his house kicked into overdrive, humming loudly, trying to fight the artificial heat wave I had created. He wanted to burn me out. He wanted to scorch my earth. Well, now he knew what it felt like to live on the surface of the sun. 20 minutes later, the pounding on my front door shook the entire frame. Boom, boom, boom. Open up. I know you're in there. Miller was screaming. This was the moment, the limit-setting moment. I walked to the door, not rushing, just calm. I opened it. Miller was red-faced, sweating profusely, a vein bulging in his forehead. He looked like he was about to explode. "You!" he spat, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You take that monstrosity down right now. You are blinding my wife. My living room is 100 degrees. You are destroying my property." I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. I didn't yell back. I didn't apologize. I spoke with a voice that was ice cold. "Mr. Miller," I said, making eye contact. "Last week, you told me my property, my rules. Do you remember that?" He sputtered. That's different. You can't build a fence that high. It's illegal. I'm going to sue you for everything you have." I stepped forward, invading his personal space, just an inch. "It is not a fence." I corrected him firmly. "It is a decorative windbreak to protect my sensitive botanical specimens, and it is completely within code." He stared at me, mouth open, like a fish out of water. "I'm calling the city," he hissed, stepping back. "I'm calling the inspector, and when he gets here, he's going to make you tear that thing down with your bare hands. You messed with the wrong man." He turned and stomped away. I watched him go. "Make the call," I whispered. "I'm ready." Thursday morning, the day of judgment. A white sedan with the city seal on the door pulled up to the curb. Out stepped Mr. Henderson, the senior zoning inspector. Miller was already there, waiting for him like a hyperactive child. He shook Henderson's hand vigorously, pointing at my wall, acting like the victim. Miller shouted, "It's an abomination. It's a hazard. Tell him to take it down." I stood in my driveway, holding my folder of documents. "Mr. Henderson nodded to me, his face neutral. He didn't smile. He took out a long yellow tape measure. Click. ZZZZ. The sound was deafening in the silence. Miller was smirking at me, crossing his arms, mouthing the words, "Bye-bye." Henderson walked to the property line. He measured the distance from the border. He checked the height. He walked around to the back, inspecting the aluminum. He took notes on his clipboard, scratching his chin. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours. My heart was pounding, but I didn't show it. Finally, Henderson retracted the tape measure. "Snap!" He looked at Miller, then he looked at me. "Well, Henderson began, his voice slow and official. Miller stepped forward, eager. "When does the demolition crew come?" he asked arrogantly. Henderson adjusted his glasses and looked at his clipboard. "Actually, Mr. Miller," he said, "there is no violation here." Miller's face went from red to a sickly shade of white. "What did you say?" he whispered, his voice cracking. Henderson turned the clipboard around and tapped it with his pen. "I said, it's legal. I checked the measurements 3 times. It is set back exactly 4 inches from the property line. And because of the structural supports and the intended use for vegetation, this is classified under Section 14B as a windbreak and trellis system, not a boundary fence." Miller looked like he was having a stroke. But look at the reflection," he shrieked, pointing at his scorching house. "It's blinding us. It's heating up my pool deck to 100 degrees. Henderson shrugged, a small, barely visible smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "The city code regulates height and placement, Mr. Miller. It does not regulate material reflectivity. Unless you can prove he's using radioactive materials, there is nothing I can do." He obtained the proper permits. "Have a nice day." The inspector tipped his hat to me and walked back to his car. Miller stood there, frozen. He looked at the wall, and then he looked at me. I didn't gloat. I didn't laugh. I just took a sip of my iced tea and said calmly, "My windbreak, my rules." He didn't scream this time. He just turned around, shoulders slumped, and walked back into his oven of a house. The slam of his door wasn't angry anymore. It was defeated. The weeks that followed were a slow, agonizing torture for the Millers. Summer hit hard, and the spite wall did its job with ruthless efficiency. The specialized aluminum I chose acted like a laser beam. By July, Miller's prize-winning Kentucky bluegrass, which he spent thousands of dollars maintaining, was scorched into a brown, crispy wasteland. The heat was so intense that his expensive ornamental palms withered and died. And the best part? Because he had to keep his blackout curtains drawn 24/7 to keep the house cool, they were living in total darkness. They lived in a multi-million-dollar cave. Meanwhile, on my side of the wall, it was a paradise. The cedar wood provided cool shade. My climbing hydrangeas loved the trellis, blooming in massive explosions of blue and purple. The wall blocked the noise of his pool pumps, the noise of his parties, and the sight of his arrogant face. One afternoon, I saw a pool maintenance truck pull up. The guy came out shaking his head. I overheard him talking to Miller. "It's the heat, sir. The water is getting too hot. The algae is blooming faster than the chemicals can kill it. Your pool is basically a warm swamp." Miller didn't say a word. He just stared at the shiny, unyielding metal wall that had ruined his perfect little kingdom. He tried to fight nature. He tried to fight me, and he lost both battles. September arrived with a cool breeze, and the sweetest sight I had ever seen. I walked out to my porch at 6 a.m., just like I used to. My mug was warm in my hands, the birds were singing in the old oak tree, and for the first time in months, there was no construction noise, no yelling, no arrogant demands. I looked across the property line. The spite wall stood tall and proud, covered in lush green vines on my side, but just beyond the edge of the driveway, stuck into the brown, dead grass of the neighbor's yard. A for sale sign, a smaller sign underneath said, "Price reduced." They couldn't take it. They couldn't live in the glare of their own rudeness. As I watched, Miller's SUV backed out of the driveway for the last time. He didn't look at my house. He didn't look at the wall. He just stared straight ahead. Broken. The moving truck followed him out. I took a deep breath, smelling the jasmine, smelling the coffee, and smelling the victory. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to fight. I just needed to stand my ground. I raised my mug to the empty house next door. Goodbye, Mr. Miller, I whispered. Then I closed my eyes and listened. The silence was back, and it was absolutely perfect.